I am Odoamne, and in this tutorial I'll be talking about Rumble. I think Rumble is a really strong champion right now. He's a top lane AP character that fits in many team comps, and he's picked mainly because he's strong in pretty much every part of the game and he fits team comps very well and has pretty good snowball potential. In the early game, what you mostly want to do is try to abuse the fact that your base stats are very high and your base damage is pretty good. So you want to start with Q and try to keep it above 50 heat while you're going to lane. Pretty much in the early game until level 5 or 6 you want to be pushing the wave against almost every matchup that's being played right now, because your Q can push the wave very easily at levels 1 and 3, and even at like levels 4 and 5 it starts scaling more, so clearing the wave is much easier as you get levels. You want to harass with your boons, as I said, pretty much every time you can, and use your W to block poke. Heading into the mid game, the champion is pretty strong mainly because his ultimate is such a good team fighting ability or skirmishing ability, so in the mid game you're pretty much just trying to shove your lane and try to maybe get some rolls off or maybe call for some dives, because dives are pretty easy because once you get at least level 6 you have a lot of damage, so dives could be pretty easy even from like 100 to 0. But outside of laning phase you just want to shove and try to roam around, try to roam to mid, maybe try some jungle fights with your team. You pretty much just want to look for skirmishes, team fights, catches in the jungle and flanks, because you're just so strong at that point in the game. You pretty much want to fight as much as you can in the mid game. In the lead game it's a bit of a different story because it's a lot harder to position, because everyone is going to be strong. Your base damage, you're still a very strong champion, but everyone's a lot stronger as well, so you can pretty much get one shot, so your base stats aren't that big anymore. So you can't really flank anymore, you just want to group with your team. Targets you want to prioritize are the tanks in front of you mainly. You just want to throw your harpoons at them so your team can kite them a lot easier, and it pretty much nullifies them if you manage to hit double harpoon on them. You can also try to ulti and hit the backline just to do as much damage as you can. You shouldn't try to hit your ulti to hit the tanks. If enemy tanks are gonna go in, you want to aim for their backline, so their backline cannot really go in, so their front line is isolated. The thing you want most to do is just group with your team and stay somewhere between your front line and your back line and just throw harpoons, AoE their tanks with your flame splitter, and if you see the opportunity maybe you can even dive past the front line and aim for the back line with your flash, because your damage is quite high at this point in the game. If you're above 50 heat your harpoons do a lot of damage and your Q is still very good. If you manage to get an opportunity and see a moment where you can dive past the front line to aim for their carries, you should probably take it, because at that point of the game you're gonna have your defensive items as well and you're gonna have a lot of damage. So pretty much the trade-off is you're gonna be out of position but you're gonna be doing a lot of damage to their carries. The core items on Rumble are pretty much magic pen boots, hunting guys into Leandry's Torment, and possibly a void staff. So those are the 3 most important items. Once you get all those 3 items, no matter how strong the enemy team is or how behind you are, if you have those 3 items you're pretty much good to go for the rest of the game. I think the best is to rush Leandry's Torment along with Sorcerer's Boots, so you can have that double pen item which give you a big spike in the early game. If you think you can snowball more and the enemy team maybe doesn't have that much MR, you can just go for the Zonias instead of voice staff, just in case their team doesn't build much MR, because once you get Zonia you can actually misposition a lot more and you can zone their whole team with Equalizer and Flame Splitter, just because once you pop it and then you go Zonia they can't really do much and they have to back off, so you're going to be putting a lot of zone control and a lot of damage in a team fight. The items you want to finish your build with are most of the time Abyssal or Rylai and Dead Cap. Those are pretty much all the items you need. There are many difficult matchups for Rumble nowadays. The tank matchups are fairly straightforward just because your scrap shield makes you kind of tankier than them in any trade, and it just gives you around 100 HP in every trade and you just out damage them with your other skills. Tanks might win in the short trade, but as long as you extend the trade by chasing them down with Q, E and W and using your overheat passive, you should win every trade. So tanks should be pretty easy matchups. They are pretty straightforward, so you can just push and bully them. Jace is a pretty hard matchup nowadays. You need to play more reserve because his early game is a lot stronger and his damages are a lot bigger than yours, so you should just try to farm as much as you can. Also the bruisers like Irelia, Jax and Yasuo, they're kind of tricky in the early game. If you're playing properly you should be able to win this, but as tips pretty much you just want to try to block engaging skills with your W just to kind of shield some of their poke and their all in, and just try to disengage with double harpoon, and once you stack the slows on them and they have to back off, then you can maybe turn and try to chase them down with your flame splitter, just as long as they can't trade back into you, and it should be pretty straightforward. There are not really many tips and combos you can do on Rumble, it's just about the passive usage, at least in the laning phase. So what you want to do is pretty much stay around 60 heat, because if you stay around that thresh mark, you should be able to just overheat every single trade. You just start with harpoon and then you double Q and you're already overheated, so trade should be pretty easy like that. Also, what you can do to catch many people by surprise is you can do E-flash instead of flash E, because if you do flash E, they will probably just react to your flash, but if you do E-flash, most of the time you will manage to get like a really big slow on them and they won't be able to react, and they will just flash after they got hit. So it will give you, the slow will be big enough for you to just catch up to them and hit them with your second part of your harpoon. All in all, I think Rumble is a pretty good champion. It's in a pretty good spot right now. He has weak matchups and his scaling is fine along with all the other top lane champions. I think that it's a pretty good balance right now. He might get outscaled by tankier comps at some point, but I think he's pretty relevant at every point of the game. He can get shut down by ganks as well, but I really like him. I think he's in a really good spot right now.